Everyone's been talking about it, giving their take, and now it's my turn. So the scrutiny over the Xbox and Activision Blizzard deal is something that I don't think is surprising, but what is interesting has been the complaints and the reasoning as to why they are scrutinizing this deal. And one of the main things that all of these competition authorities continuously are focusing on is how Xbox and how Microsoft are going to use the power of having Activision Blizzard, and are they going to use this in a way to try to foreclose the competition, specifically PlayStation. We've seen the Brazilian authorities come out, talk about their concerns, reach out to third parties, including PlayStation, and most of the other companies out there have absolutely no issues with this deal going through. But PlayStation had complaints, which prompted the Brazilian authority to look further into this, but they eventually went ahead and approved the deal. Now, when it comes to the British Market Authority, the CMA, they are currently in phase 2, and one of the main things they outlined in their investigation is how is this going to affect PlayStation as being one of the main competitors to Xbox. And then we have the EU. We know they are also going into phase 2 now. They came out with their documents from their phase 1 investigations and some of the things that they looked at, including how this is going to affect competition by potentially allowing Xbox and Microsoft to foreclose by keeping games off of other platforms, how this is going to affect things with cloud gaming, also how is this going to affect other operating systems other than Microsoft. So they've had pretty much the same arguments and reasoning why they're entering to phase 2 that the CMA and the Brazilian CADE committee came out and talked about with their investigation. But all of that to be said, there is no real, I would say, odd thing going on here. In my opinion, this is a $70 billion deal. Xbox is a $1 trillion company. They are going to be wielding a ton of power, already way more power than they currently have with the addition of Activision Blizzard into their first-party studios, and because they have the biggest video game franchise. We look at how well Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is. So there is definitely an understanding why these commissions are scrutinizing this deal to make sure that if it goes through, that the effect on the consumer, the effect on the industry is not a negative effect. I think from a gamer's perspective, somebody like myself who is just a consumer and a gamer of these products, is that the stuff that they are focusing on, that they are mentioning within these documents, although are valid in the grand scheme of video games, you don't want those things happening. The fact that they reference PlayStation so much when PlayStation does take part in a lot of these things that they're talking about is the confusing part. And I've said this in previous videos, one of the main reasons why I think they focus so much on these things and they're phrasing it and they're framing it in a way that they're worried that Microsoft is going to do this, even though PlayStation has already done these things, is because Microsoft is a $1 trillion company and they probably don't follow the video game industry as closely as somebody like myself or somebody watching the video to know that PlayStation has taken part in these types of tactics. But now it gets even more interesting as we have a tweet from a person at the EU named Ricardo Cardoso. Now, I'm sure you've seen this. If you're on social media whatsoever, you will see the entire Xbox community going at this guy, Ricardo Cardoso. It says here, the commission is working to ensure that you will be able to play Call of Duty on other consoles, and then in brackets, including my PlayStation. Also on our to-do list, update stock pictures. These gamers have wired controllers, whereas Xbox and PlayStation have wireless ones since 2006. Now we look at this tweet. I mean, it's obvious why people are upset about this. He literally says, including my PlayStation in the actual tweet itself, which implies for him, for Ricardo personally, he has a bias towards PlayStation to want to make sure that whatever happens with this deal, PlayStation is not going to suffer whatsoever, and that PlayStation is not going to lose games if Xbox is the first party owner of these IPs. And you have the argument here that Ricardo Cardoso, since he is at the EU, is kind of telling everyone the thoughts that the EU has on this deal and their bias towards trying to protect PlayStation. I'll give you my take on what I think about this. I think a lot of people are probably going to disagree with me, and I'm sure I will see it in the comments below. But my personal opinion on this tweet here from Ricardo Cardoso is it really isn't that massive of a deal, and I'll tell you why I think this. But I'll break it up into two parts. What I do think is an issue is this guy he sounds unprofessional by tweeting something out like this. He probably should have selected his words a lot more, probably should not have including my PlayStation in brackets. If you would just take that out, this tweet would literally just be continuing going along the narrative of what every single competition committee has been talking about since the investigations of this deal has started, which is looking into it and making sure that Call of Duty is going to be on other platforms. If you read through the documents, that is one of their main sticking points. They are talking about how Xbox and Microsoft could have the authority to take Call of Duty off of other platforms, which could potentially lead to the foreclosure of these platforms because of how big of a title it is. So in that sense, I understand why people are looking at this and thinking that the EU is just this corrupt, biased organization that is only out there for the protection of PlayStation, because of the way that he framed this. It was very unprofessional. He probably got in shit, probably got people telling him that he shouldn't have written including my PlayStation in that tweet. And I mean, for good reason. But let's continue here. We scroll down here, and this was just the other day, which is generally why I wait to make videos on stuff like this. It just was odd when I saw this tweet when he wrote including my PlayStation. He clarifies his stance. He clarifies everything. This is a tweet from November 12th, and he writes, "To clarify, I am not involved in the assessment of the merger and don't even work in the department dealing with mergers. As is clear from my profile, my comments are personal and not a commission position whose decision will be taken on the basis of the facts and the law." Now, I'll be honest, when I saw this initial tweet here, my first question that came to mind wasn't, is Ricardo Cardoso telling everyone that the EU is going to try to make sure this deal gets blocked for PlayStation? My first thought that actually came to mind was, I would be highly doubtful that this guy is actually one of the people that is going to be looking at this deal. Is he even in the area that looks at mergers? Is he even one of the people that is in the phase 2 investigation? My first thought was probably not. And he goes ahead and he does clarify this. Now, that doesn't take away from the fact that he definitely shouldn't have put something out like this. And people are going to say that this is telling as to where the entire EU is when it comes to this deal, which you could make that argument. I mean, he's made that the issue here. If you're somebody at the EU, you're looking at Ricardo's tweet and you're like, you're painting a terrible picture for us. You're going to make people believe that we are extremely biased against Xbox. And then we have Derek Strickland here from Tweakdown, who I think does an absolutely incredible job at actually reporting on this properly, because most of the other gaming outlets put out those headlines right away to get that clickbait, to create that outrage. Even though they'll update it probably later down the line, they know you're not going to care about those updates, but they want to get you clicking on those articles because of these things. And he waits and he puts out this report, which I think is a great report. He says, regarding the EU Commission comments, the only reason I haven't written about the particular tweet is because I want more info before I feel comfortable reporting on it. But yes, I so agree that it exposes how out of touch regulators can be regarding the games industry. I 100% agree with him that I've said this in multiple videos. I think these regulators are out of touch about the games industry. They don't know what's going on, and that's why they have to do these deep investigations, where I think once it comes down to it, the facts will prevail and they will see that Xbox has already said multiple times Call of Duty is staying on multiple platforms, and their history is going to show, based on other games that they have out there that they own that are on other platforms, they aren't going to try to foreclose these other companies like PlayStation by taking the games off of the platform. Continues on here to say, that's why phase 2 investigation is not only needed, but a good thing. Regulators will get an incredible amount of education and subtle targeted information from experts who both do and don't have a vested interest in the deal closing. I was genuinely interested in learning about the EU Commission's organizational structure. Turns out the hierarchy is quite big and covers a lot of markets and sectors. Gaming appears to be such a small part of anything they focus on. And now we move on to the actual article that he published. He did some good research here, found out the departments within the EU that is actually working on this deal. It says here, the European Commission has a specific department for mergers called Comp, which is run by the Directorate General for Competition. Cardoso is not involved in the Comp branch, nor will he be assisting with the Microsoft Activision merger. He reached out to the European Commission, to their spokesperson, and actually got a response. And the response says, as you've correctly pointed out, Mr. Cardoso works in the Director General for the internal market and not in the Directorate General for competition. Mr. Cardoso is not involved in the assessment of this transaction. Furthermore, as indicated clearly in his Twitter profile, he tweets in a personal capacity. And we can go back to Derek Strickland's tweets about this article, and you can see he highlights exactly the different departments. And Cardoso is part of the Grow department, which is related to internal market industry, entrepreneurships, and SMEs. And more specifically, Cardoso is part of the Grow D networks and governance, D4 interinstitutional relations and outreach. Whatever all of that stuff means, the point here is there's absolutely, in my opinion, zero conflict of interest or anything like that along those lines because Cardoso put out this tweet. I believe Derek Strickland here says that as well. Says the big takeaway here is that Cardoso does not speak for the European Commission. He does not even speak for the branch that handles competition and mergers. There does not appear to be conflict of interest in this instant. Probably wasn't a good thing to tweet though, which is my takeaway 100% from this. That terrible tweet. Shouldn't have put my PlayStation. It's just a stupid tweet. Probably wasn't thinking when he wrote that, but the actual conflict of interest between the people that are looking at this deal and making the decisions, I think there really isn't any. So I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this because their take is going to be he works at the EU. He has contacts there. He's going to be able to try and influence people who are making the decision on this deal. And I think that's kind of just wrong, in my opinion. You have to have zero faith that they are going to be looking at the law. They are going to be actually doing a proper investigation to believe that type of stuff, which I think at the end of the day, like I've said multiple times, these people just don't know that much about the gaming industry. So that's why they're going into these in-depth investigations. And once they see the facts, once they look at the law, once they see that things that are happening around the video game industry, I think the natural conclusion here is going to be that Xbox, Microsoft are not going to try and foreclose PlayStation. They could have already tried these types of strategies with games like Minecraft, which is a massive game, which they absolutely did not do. So I think that is going to be completely thrown out the window as soon as they look deeper into this. And you also kind of have to be a little bit naive to think that everybody at the EU doesn't already have a personal bias if they are gamers. There are people on the mergers and acquisition committee that are actually working on this deal that probably like Xbox more than PlayStation. There are some that will like PlayStation more than Xbox. There are some that will like PC. There are some that will like the Nintendo Switch. Personally, the tweet was bad, but I don't foresee this having any sort of effect on whether this deal goes through or not. I think it is just a lot of outrage based off of the optics and a lot of the framing that has been going around because Ricardo Cardoso made a mistake. Shouldn't have said my PlayStation, but at the end of the day, this deal, it's not going to have any effect on it. That tweet, Ricardo's thoughts on his PlayStation is going to have zero effect, in my opinion, on whether the Xbox and Activision Blizzard deal either passes or gets blocked. But that's it for me. I know a lot of you are probably going to disagree, but let me know in the comments below. Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think I'm an idiot? Do you think I'm right? Do you think Derek Strickland is right? I think he did some great reporting, and I would love to see more people take the time before putting out the outrage articles when you're a big, massive media site like GameSpot, IGN, all these big sites out there. So I think he did a great job there. So shout out to him. But thank you guys for watching. Thank you for your support. If you enjoyed it, consider hitting that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next video.
Bye.